Hello, my name is Paul Hamblin and I'm Managing Director of EuroSite Power. Welcome to our webinar. This webinar is going to introduce the Crown Commercial Services Heat Networks and Energy Generation Assets Dynamic Purchasing System, often referred to as HELGA. And in particular, we're going to look at how it can be used to procure on-site generation solutions using an energy purchase agreement. Today we'll cover a number of topics, including an introduction to EuroSite Power and Crown Commercial Services. We'll explain the HELGA Dynamic Purchasing System. We'll explore the different technologies that can be used for on-site generation and that are available using HELGA. We'll explain the different types of energy purchase agreements commonly used with on-site generation systems. We'll consider a case study. We'll explain how HELGA Service 3 can be used to procure a similar solution. And finally, we'll take a look at how EuroSite Power can help you achieve these goals. Firstly, an introduction to EuroSite Power. EuroSite Power owns and operates a range of clean on-site energy systems that produce electricity, hot water, heat and cooling energy. Typically, these are combined heat and power units or CHP. But we also have heat pumps and high efficiency chillers within our fleet. Today we have 45 systems installed and operating across the UK. In total, these generate some 5.6 megawatts of electrical energy. We also have 3 further systems under construction, which will add around a further 300 kilowatts of electricity generation. All of these systems are supported by our own dedicated in-house maintenance team. And we also have a nationwide parts distribution centre that enables us to get common spare parts and items for repairs to our engineers in very quick time. Our customers range from both the private and public sectors, from both small to large businesses, and this slide just gives you an indication of some of our existing customers. EuroSite Power are very pleased to have been named as a supplier on the Heat Networks and Electricity Generation Assets Dynamic Purchasing Systems, where we are specifically able to compete to provide products and services under 2 of the service provisions within the system. These are Service 2 for the delivery and installation, management and maintenance of either demand management products or energy generation systems, or under Service 3, which is the provision of energy purchase agreements to provide either electricity directly or indirectly wired to your building and or heat that's directly connected to your building. It's now worth having a look at who Crown Commercial Services are. Crown Commercial Services, or CCS, are an executive agency of the Cabinet Office operating as a trading fund. They are in fact the biggest public procurement organisation in the UK, and they help all sorts of public organisations to buy common goods and services while also providing best value for money. This is delivered through their own commercial expertise of their own people and via their customer focused approach. The aim is to harness the bulk buying power and policy insight to ensure delivery of fit for purposes solutions to all their customers throughout the public sector. This slide shows the 4 areas of work that Crown Commercial Services focus upon. They often refer to them as the 4 pillars. It also shows the commercial benefit delivered by CCS in each of these areas. As you will note, energy forms part of the buildings pillar, and it is within this team that the CCS team responsible for HELGA are based. There's a wide range of different agreements available to purchase these services, and you can learn more about the CCS agreements available by using the Find an Agreement page on the CCS website. So what is HELGA? Well, HELGA stands for Heat Networks and Energy Generation Assets. And the dynamic purchasing system has been established to enable government and public sector bodies to access related products and services. The principles and benefits of using the agreement are that the right suppliers hear about opportunities at the right time. It provides an accessible route for suppliers to apply and register their interest in HELGA at any time. It offers you, the customer, a dynamic filtering system, giving you flexibility to choose suppliers based upon your specific requirements. And it offers quality and price that can be assessed based upon an individual customer's requirements, and gives you an efficient structure and approach to commissioning a wide variety of projects. And in fact, as you can see on the slide, the range of products and services that are available through HELGA is quite broad. It ranges from energy efficiency and demand management in buildings, including telemetry and energy storage technologies and batteries, through to power generation assets like CHP that can either be procured as a capital project or within a heat or power purchase agreement. There is no minimum or maximum value for projects that are procured through HELGA. If we now turn to look at HELGA in a little bit more detail, it's worth first considering what a dynamic purchasing system is. Well, a DPS is a public sector sourcing tool for services and goods. It's similar to an electronic framework, but new suppliers can join at any time. This is an electronic way of sourcing, which means that both suppliers and customers do not need any special IT equipment. It therefore eliminates unnecessary activity for both the supplier and the customer. Suppliers can apply to join at any point, and their ability to join and be named within the framework depends upon selection criteria that are used to appoint the suppliers. This process is managed by CCS. Suppliers then have the opportunity to bid for multiple projects in multiple competitions and ultimately to be awarded multiple contracts. But these are based upon specific specifications drawn up by you, the customer. Within HELGA, there are 5 services that you can make use of. Service 1 is an energy advisory, design and technical services. This is perhaps best thought of as being consultancy services, and it relates to advice and design of energy demand management or energy generation type of asset. Service 2 is the delivery of the projects. This would normally be done as a capital purchase, and it will include the installation and maintenance of any type of demand management or generation type asset. Service 3 is the procurement of energy generation assets using an energy purchase agreement, and we're going to focus on this a little later in today's webinar, so I'll move on to Service 4. Service 4 is for the provision of what is often referred to as commoditized products, where you can take advantage of bulk purchasing power for products that are required for energy demand management or energy generation. And finally, Service 5, often referred to as the one-stop shop, is any combination of the previous 4 services that we've discussed. If we now turn to have a look at the range of technologies that could be procured using HELGA, you'll see that there's a wide range of different generation technologies for electricity only, heat only, or electricity and heat that could be deployed using HELGA. This includes things that you're probably familiar with, such as solar PV and CHP units, but also includes some more innovative technologies like ground source heat pumps, but even simpler solutions like high efficiency boilers or chillers. It's also important to realise that as technology develops, we would expect that the HELGA list of technologies would be increased, and in fact the little group of other gives you flexibility to consider new technologies as and when they become available. Let's now turn to have a look at energy purchase agreements. Within HELGA, there are 3 types of energy purchase agreement that can be procured. The first is known as a power purchase agreement, and in these arrangements you can either have one of 2 types of connection. There's what's known as a direct wired connection, where you typically have an on-site generator, for example a solar PV panel, that's connected behind your main fiscal meter. The electricity is sold to you on site and is used by the building in which the system is installed. The alternative arrangement is what's known as an indirect wired connection, and here you will buy electricity from the grid That electricity will be generated by an off-site generator through which you have a power purchase agreement to buy that electricity. This type of arrangement is often referred to as electricity that is sleeved through the grid from the site of the generator to your building. The next type of agreement that's available is a heat-only purchase agreement. In this case, the energy generation asset, for example, a biomass boiler or perhaps a high-efficiency chiller, is connected directly to your building's heating or cooling system. The final type of energy purchase agreement is a combined heat and power purchase agreement. And in this case, there are a number of different options. Again, you can have a direct wired connection for the electricity. So your CHP unit would be mounted behind the main fiscal meter, and the heating system from the CHP is then directly connected to your building. Or again, you can have a different type of arrangement where you're buying electricity from an off-site power generator that is sleeved through the grid. This would be known as an indirect wired connection. And then the heating or cooling output is directly connected to your building's heating or cooling system. For the purposes of the ongoing part of this webinar, we're going to focus on the direct wired connections, and we're now going to turn to have a look at some typical types of arrangement. So a good place to start is to consider how a direct energy purchase agreement works. So let's start with the basics. So in the basic form, an EPA works by the supplier funding, owning, maintaining and operating the energy generation asset that's to be installed. Whether this is a solar PV panel, a biomass boiler, a high efficiency chiller or a CHP unit. In return, the customer agrees to buy the energy generated by that asset at an agreed price and over an agreed period. This means that the supplier is providing the CapEx budget to buy and install the asset, and they're also providing the OpEx budget to maintain and repair the asset across its life. Typically, the asset appears on the supplier's balance sheet, and the supplier carries all or some of the operational and commercial risks. Now, it's worth considering at this point what those risks might be. So typically, when you are designing and installing an energy generation assets, there are clearly some technical risks associated with that design, and then there are risks associated with its installation, particularly where you're retrofitting that asset into an existing building. During the construction, you might find issues occur that increase the cost of that installation, and in this case, the supplier will be carrying those risks. Once the system's installed and operating, there are clearly other risks in the longer term. You might have a breakdown or a repair that's required, and that risk would be taken by the supplier. And commercially, certain types of asset also carry commercial risks in terms of delivering the saving and the value that is intended from the asset. So for example, with a combined heat and power unit, one of the key commercial risks is known as spark spread. This is the difference in the cost price of the gas that fuels the machine and the electricity that's generated by the machine. If that spread between those two prices narrows, then the saving that's delivered to you as the end user reduces. If you own that piece of equipment, then you're carrying that risk. If the supplier is providing it through an energy purchase agreement, then typically the supplier will be carrying all or at least some of that risk. Moving on now to have a look at the customer aspect of this. The customer is clearly providing from their operating budget the money to buy the energy that's being produced by the asset. Importantly, that energy is usually cheaper, or in a well-designed energy purchase agreement it will be cheaper than your existing arrangements. And of course what this enables you to do is to preserve your CapEx budget to spend on other things. And the customer avoids the risks that we were talking about a minute ago that are normally associated with owning these type of energy assets. It's important also to realise that in a well-designed energy purchase agreement, they'll generally provide an off-balance sheet solution for you as the customer. Ultimately, the key benefits of a direct energy purchase agreement are that you don't have any upfront investment and you're not putting that capital at risk. You're giving yourself protection for future energy price changes. As a result of generating on site, you're generally lowering your carbon related taxes, And of course you're benefiting from the operational expertise of the supplier you're working with, because at the end of the day this is what their business is about, and this will be where their expertise skill set is based. Energy purchase agreements have actually been quite commonly used over the past 20 to 30 years, and are very typically seen with combined heat and power solutions. And what this slide shows you is 3 examples of the typical types of contract that are provided for a CHP solution. In the first example, you often see discounted tariff arrangements where the supplier will provide the capital investment to deliver the CHP solution. You're then paying for the heat and the electricity that's generated, normally at a discounted rate. This will provide you with a good energy cost saving, and remember the supplier is providing the maintenance. They're very often buying the gas that goes into the machine, which means that they're taking on the spark spread risk and a lot of the other risks associated with owning and operating that plant. As an alternative, you can often find agreements where you typically just buy the electricity for the unit and you'll buy that at a fixed price arrangement, but you will be providing the gas that goes into the machine. The energy cost savings in this example will be better than in the first arrangement, but you are carrying the spark spread risk, which is increasing the overall risk profile of the project. However, a large chunk of the risks still reside with the supplier. And just for comparison purposes, I've just shown also an example here if you were to buy the asset instead. And of course, in this case, you're providing the capital investment to deliver the project. You're buying the gas that goes into it. Yes, you'll get the best financial saving doing it this way, but you'll also be taking on all the risks associated with the ownership and operation of that asset. So we thought it would be good to begin by having a look at a case study. Now, this particular project, the Clifton Hospital in Lytham St Anne's, wasn't actually procured under the HELGA arrangement because it predated the creation of HELGA. However, it does provide a really good example of how an energy purchase agreement could be used to provide value to your organisation. This particular hospital is operated by the Blackpool Teaching Hospitals NHS Foundation Trust. It's a small local hospital in Lytham St Anne's on the Fylde coast. To give you some sense of the scale of the building, it has 4 wards with 96 beds. It has a number of specialist clinics, including Parkinson's disease, speech therapy, dermatology and rheumatology. It also has a small local X-ray department, and it's really there to provide community services to the local population. In terms of the project itself, there was an existing life-expired CHP unit that the Trust had realised needed to be replaced, and initially they'd issued the ODU notification for a replacement using a capital style project where they were going to buy the asset and then operate it through a long-term maintenance agreement. However, they also invited the companies tendering to put forward some alternatives, and we suggested a combined heat and power purchase agreement that would enable us to deliver the project at 0 capital cost for the Trust, and they simply entered into an agreement that enabled them to buy low-cost energy from us over a 15-year agreement. This project was first became operational in June 2014, and since then has produced something in the region of just over £90,000 worth of savings and some 883 tonnes of reduced CO2 emissions. This is over and above the original forecasts that were presented to the Trust before the contracts were signed. We think this provides a really good example, and when we come on now to have a look at how to use the HELGA DPS, it's always worth just keeping this project in the back of your mind. So let's take a look at how to use the HELGA DPS. Well, the first thing to do is to make sure you've registered as a customer, and you'll see at the bottom of the slide here the address to use at which you go and register for use of CCS's framework agreements, not just for HELGA but for anything that you wish to use them to help you procure products and services. So the first stage is to think a little bit about the products or services, or if you prefer, the project that you intend to deliver using HELGA. You don't have to define that in absolute detail at this moment in time. In fact, what's useful is perhaps to create a high-level specification focused really on your key requirements that you want to deliver from the project itself. From there, you can interrogate the HELGA DPS and create a short list of suppliers using the dynamic purchasing system that you may wish to go out to for some pre-market engagement in order to help you assess the requirements that you want specifically for your project. Now, this stage is optional, however, pre-market engagement can be useful. So, for example, it's useful for you to communicate with the suppliers ahead of issuing the final specification. It's important that this is done in a fair and transparent way. It provides each supplier in your shortlist with an equal opportunity to put forward their ideas. This allows you to shape your specification, to gather ideas, particularly on new and innovative products, and to understand if there are any changes within the market that may influence your requirements moving forward. Remember, if you do decide to speak to the industry ahead of your call for competition, you must prepare an outline of your specification before you contact them, and CCS do provide a draft specification template that you can use to help you with this. It's important that you contact all the suppliers from your shortlist, but you can choose how to contact them. For instance, you can email them for information, you can invite them to an event or a meeting to discuss your requirements, or you could issue a formal request for information. This stage is very much informal and it's very much about information gathering. If suppliers don't want to engage at this stage, you shouldn't assume that they don't want to participate in the future. And all suppliers shortlisted from your marketplace search should have the option to bid when you issue your final call for competition. So the next stage is to finalise that specification. Remember to use the pre-market engagement process responses if they were valuable to you. And as part of that process, you should also consider how you're going to evaluate your the tenderer's response when they're returned, and to think about those criteria and any special requirements that you have. Next thing to do is to update your supplier shortlist and get a current version of that from the HELGA DPS. And you might find that at this stage another optional requirement is to do a capability assessment. The capability assessments provide you with a quick and easy way of understanding whether or not a supplier is able to provide you with a solution. You can run a series of yes or no questions that are mandatory for suppliers to pass in order to get to the written stage, for example. You might have a stated deadline that you want to achieve, or you might have a particular type of technology that you want to have delivered. Please use questions that relate to the key requirements only at this stage, and not those that you could score properly within your written stage of your process. You do not need to send the final specification to suppliers who've deselected themselves in the capability assessment unless you make material changes to the specification result of this exercise. You then move to the stage where you publish your full specification to all the shortlisted suppliers. Make sure you include details of the timescales and the deliverables that you require back, and also inform the suppliers of the evaluation criteria. You then go through a process of evaluation, considering each of the suppliers' proposals against those evaluation criteria and scoring each proposal that's been issued. Another optional point at this stage might be to request specific evidence from the suppliers of similar works that they might have carried out beforehand, but as I said, this particular part of the process is optional. You may already have covered that off, for example, within your capability assessment stage. Then you get to a point where you are going to award the contract to the successful supplier. Please remember to inform all those that are unsuccessful, because this helps suppliers remain engaged within the process. And then finally, you sign those contracts and inform Crown Commercial Services of the contract details. So, how can EuroSite Power help on this journey? The first thing is we can help you to think about how to define the products and services that you need for your project. We can also help you create that high-level specification to consider as your key requirements. We'd be very happy to participate in pre-market engagement as well, and provide you with additional feedback at that stage should you opt to take advantage of the pre-market engagement process within the HELGA flow. Finally, of course, we will seek to prepare proposals and bid into the project in the event that you decide to take the project forward. And clearly, we obviously hope to be able to deliver a project to you at the end of the competition phase. In order to begin this process, we will need some following information. It's very useful to have this information as early in the process as possible, as it enables us to complete a desktop study, after which we can define our findings and agree with you how you wish to proceed. The information that we would need is typically electricity consumption data, ideally half-hourly data covering at least the last 12 months, but longer is better, and detail of your current electricity tariffs. Similarly, we'll need to know detail of your gas consumption on site, and a copy of a recent gas bill, or at least knowledge of the gas tariffs. It's good to know the detail of any pre-existing on-site power generation systems like solar PV or CHP systems, and detail of all your existing main plant, such as boilers and chillers, etc. It's also worth considering if you have other sources of energy on site, for example biofuel or biomass that you're using for heating, then please provide consumption detail or delivery details for those fuels, as well, as that will need that to complete our initial assessment. So I hope you found the webinar useful. Please feel free to contact us with any questions. Contact details are shown on the slide here. We very much look forward to discussing your future projects with you. Thank you.